see, I know that addiction can be anyone, but I always felt that football fans and say like FPL players were targeted a lot by these betting companies. Like it's strongly associated with sport. Like I said, over here they have a day off for the horse racing, shirt sponsors, advertising in stadiums, ads on the TV. Do you think that will ever change, or is it for sport and football and going to be associated with gambling?
I suffered with addiction and mental health struggles for 13 years. So 7 years ago, I set up a company that now raises awareness and educates on topics like addiction and mental health, and does that through lived experience.
Good day, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. I'm FPL Roo, and I'm joined by Mark, founder of WHYSUP. How's it going, Mark?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Tommy. Good to be on. Okay. Good to catch up with you.
Yeah. Cheers for coming on. So just wanted to start with, what is WHYSUP?
Yeah, so WHYSUP was started 7 years ago, ultimately to turn a negative into a positive, and that's because I suffered with addiction and mental health struggles for 13 years. So 7 years ago, I set up a company that now raises awareness and educates on topics like addiction and mental health, and does that through lived experience. So all our speakers that stand up on a stage or go in a school or a business have got lived experience, share their story and give some education on them two topics. So yeah, something that started off as an idea 7 years ago is now in lots of different sectors and works in lots of different places, and I absolutely love doing it.
Yeah, nice. When did you first come up with the idea?
So I was in rehab in 2013. I got a job volunteering at the rehab for about 18 months. I knew I wanted to go into something along this, in this space. But I'd say probably about 3 years after leaving rehab, I started thinking, what could I do? And, some people might train to be a counsellor, a therapist, or something like that. And I just started having discussions with a friend of mine who'd also gone through some struggles at the time. And we sort of came up with an idea of this might be a good business. We're not a charity, we're a business. And yeah, something that started off an idea of us going in a school and standing on stage. It's very much different today. There's only so far your story can take you. But yeah, it started about 3 years into my recovery, I'd say.
And what so you said you're going to schools and different businesses. Is that as a 6-week program, or sometimes you do it one-off?
All different, to be honest, Tommy. So it's like it can be one-off. So if it's a school, we're in schools on a regular basis where they just want one session, and it might be a school approaching us and saying we've got a problem with vaping, we've got a problem with gaming, gambling, whatever it may be, and we go in and do a one-off. A one-off can be a 1-year group presentation, or a one-off can be we do 5 sessions where we do the whole school in a day. But then other schools work with us on programs. We can do 6 weeks or 12 weeks programs, which is more of an impact, and we're seeing that through our work. But then a lot of schools now, they partner with us for the year. So we've got like 5-year partnerships with the schools where they do a common theme each year. So it might be talking about mental health and wellbeing in year 7. Year 8 might be addiction, and we might cover lots of different topics there. So we do a different theme each year. And that way, that student from years 7 to 11 will get the full WHYSUP experience, to be honest. And we're seeing massive impact through that. So a lot of our work can be stood in front of an audience of 200 students. Sometimes it can be a workshop with 30 students, and sometimes it can be one-to-one mentoring through students that might need that sort of deeper support.
And there's obviously must be a benefit from going in that early and talking about addiction openly, rather than, I guess, normally it's, behind closed doors. What is the benefit of that, going in early?
Yeah, it's difficult to measure prevention, really, but that's what we're talking about, prevention. And are we saying we're going to prevent all addictions? Probably not, or definitely not, to be honest, because people will still experiment and things will get out of balance for some people. But what I hope we do is enable people to spot warning signs in themselves or others, And we always say that in our sessions, this session isn't just for those that might be struggling, because a student might be in year 9 and think, why do I need to listen to this if I've never gambled? It's never
Yeah.
impacted me. But what we try and say is it's about upskilling everyone in the room. So that person might leave school at 16, they might go to university, start getting a bit of spare cash, start gambling on something like the slots, whatever it might be. They can then spot the signs in that if something's getting out of balance. But also, a lot of young people in our sessions might be living with a parent that's suffering with addiction. They might be living with an older brother or a sister. And we're not saying they can necessarily stop that, but they may be able to help support, but also set some boundaries with that family member. So we put a lot of stuff in our sessions about the wider impact. We talk about what it's like being a family member for someone that might be struggling with addiction or mental health. So I think we upskill everyone. And people always ask me, would you have still gambled if Wise Up would have come in your school? And I think I would have done, but I would have hit the stop button much sooner. And I think I would have known how to stop much sooner, where I was always just thinking, well, I've tried Gamblers Anonymous and it does work for some people, but for me, I didn't really stick to it. I didn't throw myself into it. So I thought, well, I've tried that now. There's no other options. But now, with all the options that we give in these sessions and signposting information and education around it, I hope people know much sooner that there's lots of help and support available.
And obviously, the people that are not in the schools that you talk to, what signs should they be looking at, maybe for themselves or for a loved one, if they are concerned about an addiction?
Yeah, it's a tough one. One thing I will say is it's usually the family member that sees it before the addict. The addict is usually the last one to see it, and by that by that time they've caused loads of hurt and devastation in the family. Lying is a big one. Addiction hand in hand comes with lies. So dishonesty is a big one when it comes to addiction. Changes in behaviour, mood swings, not handling normal situations that we call stress in everyday life. If you get someone who's not suffering with addiction dealing with stress, they probably deal with stress a lot better than someone who's got an addiction who has a dysfunctional way of dealing with stress. They might get agitated. If we're talking about gambling, there might be financial problems. If it's in the workplace, we talk about absenteeism a lot, but I think presenteeism is a big thing now. And what we mean by that is people with addiction a lot of the time still go in work. They're probably not the best performance levels at that time, but yeah, what I would say is it's just that change in behaviour. If you do suspect someone has got an addiction, read up on the warning signs and be quite direct around it. Ask questions, don't allow no wriggle room. Addicts are very manipulative. And I think you've got to be quite direct with them and set boundaries with an addict. Tell them what you will accept and what you won't accept. And if they do cross that line, you step back, which is hard when you love someone. It's hard to set them boundaries, but what you end up doing is, if it's a gambling problem and you're bailing that person out all the time, in a way you're enabling their addiction. And that's not to blame anybody, because when you see a family member struggling and they might owe money, you think you can fix it by paying it off. But what happens again, that behaviour doesn't change. So yeah, be quite direct, allow no wriggle room, set them boundaries, and always encourage professional help and support. I don't know one addict that can stop on their own. They've got to get some professional help and support, and that can come in many forms, from fellowship meetings, one-to-one therapy, or rehabs. There's lots of different help.
Yeah. I know you said with an addict, they're kind of good at hiding, I guess, their addiction, or maybe even going into work and everything seems like they're not on it. They don't have an addiction. I wanted to talk about, basically, I guess, someone that is addicted to alcohol or drugs. You can maybe tell a bit because there's signs of it. You can maybe smell it on their breath, or they're looking a bit tired the next day. But can we just touch on gambling, because with gambling, it's on your phone now. Everything's in secret. You're not in the bookie. You might not be in the bookie anymore with people sitting there all day. It's so easily acceptable and socially acceptable as well. There's, especially in Australia, we have a day off for the Melbourne Cup, a full public holiday day off for this horse racing event. So it's so socially acceptable that they literally have a day off for it. How would you tell if someone has a gambling addiction when there aren't them signs that maybe someone with an alcohol or drug addiction has?
Yeah, it's a good point, that, and I think a big point that you raised there is, like, it's a part of culture, and it is in the UK as well. I think all young people are encouraged from a young age to put the Grand National on, so that's our biggest horse racing event of the year. And you've got kids at like 10 years old picking an horse out of, this sweepstake that they've got, and it always worries me that most of the time these young kids would lose. But what happens when that young kid of a 10-year-old wins a large amount of money? Um, an example, I worked with a kid who was 13 years old in this country, had put a football bet on with his dad, and they won £16,000.
Wow.
And even the teacher, when I went in school, was sort of saying, wow, him and his dad have won all this money. And I said, well, one, it's illegal, he shouldn't be gambling. But that young person is never going to gamble responsibly again, because he's always going to be chasing that one big win. So you are right about drugs and alcohol, and to be honest, most alcoholics can hide it quite well, but like you said, sometimes it might be them physical signs. They might look a little bit disheveled, or you might be able to smell it. The dangerous thing about gambling is it can be someone who's got a smile on the face, like I was, going into work every day in a shirt and tie and pretending that they're okay. Now, I do think there were signs in me that people might have been able to see. I was having time off at times, and I was saying I was depressed and going through it, which technically was true, but it was because of the addiction. Um, I was never meeting deadlines in the workplace. But also a big thing alongside it when it comes to a gambling addiction is the financial impact. So first off, it was my family seeing the warning signs, because as an 18-year-old, when I was living with my mum, I was never paying rent to her. I was never giving her money. I was always asking her for money. So that was a big sign. I remember her questioning me. But when I look at the workplace, that eventually then two worlds collided, because I tried to keep it out of the workplace, but I ended up owing several people money, and I owed him over their money, her over their money. They was
At
covering
work.
for me. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And I looked in my last job, and I did this when I started Wise Up. I worked in quite a big office, and I think I affected about 25 people in that office. Not all 25 I owed money to, but some of them were in my team and were covering for me, as in I was making excuses and asking them to lie to my boss. Some of them I did owe money to. Then it was the director that I was lying to. Some guy who was training me up, I was constantly lying to him. I was making excuses why I couldn't come in work. So the ripple effect of one addict in a workplace was absolutely massive, and it wasn't just affecting me. And they say for every one addict, it affects 10 people. But certainly with gambling, the financial side, um, being a liar, not meeting deadlines, all these things in the workplace. But then also, obviously, it impacted my mental health. I was down a lot. It's quite difficult. It's quite difficult. But if someone is coming to you with financial problems, and you help them, or they get out of it, and then it happens again and again and again, sometimes it can be because of a gambling addiction.
Yeah. Okay. And can people come to you for support? And if that's a yes, what are the typical demographic of those that come to you that have been affected by addiction, or specifically kind of gambling, or could it be anyone?
Yeah, so the answer is yeah, absolutely. Basically, I work with professional footballers who are on millions of pounds a year that have gambling addictions and have nothing. I work with construction workers. I work with people in law firms, teachers. I work in a rehab where there's been people in there that have won you know, been professional footballers. They've been from every background, so it can affect anybody. And I think it does affect everybody, whether that's directly of the person that's struggling or indirectly affected other, that they've got someone that they know. I know several people in my life that have gone through a gambling addiction. Of some have come out the other side, some haven't, some are still battling it. And they're all sorts of different types of people. So what we try and do is we try and signpost. We funded a support line for 4 years, but because of the demand for it and it wasn't funded, the demand was there, but because we wanted to improve it and stuff, we're looking at pieces of funding now, because it can't be funded from ourselves, from our business, because there was just that many people reaching out. But we always signpost on the back of our sessions, and we always encourage professional help and support. And one thing I'll say about that, Tommy, is a lot of people now hear the words asking for help is the most important step, and I tend to agree with that. It's a big step if you turn around and say, I'm struggling. But what a lot of people have found over the last 7 years working in this job is a lot of people put their head above the parapet and say, I've got an addiction, I'm struggling. Or they might not say, I've got an addiction, I've got a problem with something, I'm really struggling. And they have this euphoric feeling of, wow, I've finally got it off my chest. But then they don't put the steps in after it. So they don't follow up with that therapy session, or they go to one therapy session and think, no, that wasn't really for me. I don't need this. I'm fine now. I've told people about it. But if you have got an addiction and you have done that, gone from a habit to a problem to an addiction, there's a good chance you've done it for a very long time. And it takes more than one appointment or one meeting or telling someone that you're struggling to stop. It takes years of recovery, to be honest, and really working hard on it. But that said, it is possible. So if someone's watching this and struggling with it, don't feel like it's this big daunting thing. It's actually quite exciting when you start turning your life around and you see the improvements and the ripple effect, and not only the impact that it has on yourself and your own well-being, but you start seeing people smiling around you instead of upsetting everyone in tears, which a lot of addicts do.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned about not just going to one session, going to say 6 sessions and going for 6 years, 12 years. Does it ever, are you ever kind of not an addict, or not don't have an addiction? Does it completely go away? Or is it like a life
I think it's a life thing. I placed my last bet in 2013. I've not gambled on the lottery, a game of pool. I've not gambled on anything for that 10 years, because one small bet for me is like one small drink for an alcoholic. I can't do it. Do I go around always classing myself as an addict? Not really. I believe I class myself as in recovery. You know, I think I'll always have that disease of addiction in me that I've got to keep at bay. It can get out of balance in other things sometimes. During the pandemic, when everyone was shopping online, I'm like addicted to my trainers now, and had to stop myself from buying endless amounts of trainers. So things can get out of balance, and I laugh about it. But I remember one occasion in the pandemic that my partner turned around to me and she said, "Is that another pair of trainers that you've ordered?" And I sort of like made an excuse and found myself like trying to manipulate the situation, that no, I'm selling this pair on, and I do sell a few pair on eBay and stuff like that. But I was thinking, hang on a minute, I'm being a bit manipulative here. Like, this is getting out of balance, because I'm feeling like I'm having to lie about it. So I actually sat down with my partner and said, I do think it's getting a bit like, I'm very impulsive, where see a pair of trainers, I like them, I'm ordering them. And that's my healthy addiction at the minute, but it can become unhealthy.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on trainers. Like when I was probably 17, 18, any bit of money I had would just go on trainers. And I'd again make up excuses like that are new releases. One day I'm going to be able to sell them for more.
I remember you having a pair of Nike. I remember you having a pair of Nike Jordans, and I remember finding out how much they were. I thought, wow.
Yeah. I sold them in the end, but now they're worth 10 times.
You're joking, are they? Again,
Yeah,
they're worth a couple of grand then, weren't they?
yeah. I think now
Wow.
you're looking about 20, I think. So, but yeah, that's all right.
Wow. Oh God, I'm going to
Yeah.
start looking for pairs after this.
Yeah.
You've flicked that switch.
So
No, but
so this is
yeah.
yeah.
On that, like I said, just to be clear, if you have ever suffered with an addiction, I don't believe you can ever go back being responsible on something. So it always worries me when I've been in rehab with someone and they say, "Do you know what? It was the horses that was bad for me. I'm just going to have a football bet."
Mhm.
No, absolutely not. If you've crossed that line of being, a pathological gambler or a gambling addict, then you can't go back and start being responsible again. It's complete abstinence.
So is addiction the thing, and then gambling is the vice for the addiction? Is that how it
Yeah,
works?
you could look at it like that. We talk at WHYSUP, we talk about addiction in our own right, because then you can see, if someone's in one of our sessions and listening and it's the topic's gambling, they don't have to shut off, because we talk about the actual behavior of addiction and how you go from a habit to having a problem to an addiction. And if you're listening to that, you think, well, actually, I don't gamble, but I do that with my mobile phone. I don't gamble, but I do that with gaming. And I think if you can look at that and learn about addiction in its own right, you can see it can take many different forms. And in today's society, FPL being one of them, things can get out of balance. If you're thinking about something, and it's gone from a habit of something that you can leave, but then it's taking over, where it's like you're at work and you're constantly on, you're changing your team, for example, and before you know it, it's every minute of every day that have got that obsession. It's having a negative impact on your life, but you're still going back to it, and that's how quickly it can form.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing that I've got back from not gambling on my team or football that I'm watching. However, the behaviour is very similar and the outcomes are similar to FPL.